Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power.
Otep, this is Femi here with Freedom Now, and your ears are in tuned at high frequencies in a liberated zone. Freedom Now is a Pan-Africanist, global news outlet from coast to coast, dispelling the Western propaganda media and their all lies point of views. Freedom Now is devoted to relay true news, views, and proper clues to form solutions around freedom for the oppressed worldwide. Now, get relaxed, grab a pen, and phone a friend, because Freedom Now is set to begin to awaken deep sleepers dreaming about freedom now, within, in, freedom now, in.
Habari gani? This is Sister Thade with Freedom Now's agenda for this first Saturday of 2024, January 6th. We commence with our sister, Luyanda Kuboka, and the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar. Then, prolific author, radical historian, Professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, and Freedom Now co-producer, Dr. Gerald Horne interviews Dr. Everett Hardy II, visiting Assistant Professor of History at Bates College in Maine, here to discuss his paper, Philadelphia Red Summer of 1918, that he presented in Jacksonville, Florida recently at the Association of African American Life and History. And later in the hour, we broadcast an interview conducted by Block Report Radio's Minister of Information, J.R. Valray, interviewing Dr. Gerald Horne regarding Haiti, Cuba, and the Congo. This interview honors the January 1st date that marks Haiti's independence and the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, and we remind our listeners of the importance of our international solidarity as we continue to raise global consciousness about genocide in the Congo. We do so in Palestine. Also, today, January 6th, there is an LA protest to shut it down for Palestine. This is happening at the Zionist Consulate, January 6th. That's today at 2:30 p.m. It's happening at the Federal Building, which is at 11766 Wilshire Boulevard. In LA, the zip code is 90025. Our music clip mix includes MLK, Zap Mama, Art Blakey, John Coltrane, Oscar Pettiford, Alice Coltrane, Charles Mingus, and MIA, and more. So sit back, phone a friend, and as always, we stand ready for revolution.
Alafia. This is Sister Luyanda Kuboka with Freedom Now's weekly African Drumbeat Historical Calendar, with significant dates, events, and personalities in the struggle for a just society and an egalitarian world. January 12, 1977. The 1949 Geneva Convention on the Rules of War is signed, giving guerrillas the same rights as uniformed soldiers in war. January 13, 1971. 6,000 workers strike against the settler colonial rule in Windhoek, Namibia. January 14, 1960. The United Nations General Assembly adopts the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. January 15, 1929. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the first leader of an independent Egypt, was born. Nasser, a revolutionary nationalist, struggled to defend Egypt's liberation from the neo-colonial forces of the United States, Britain, and Israel's efforts to throw back on the shackles of economic colonialism, as well as to unite with other newly liberated African countries. January 15, 1929. Dr. Martin Luther King was born. Dr. King, a principled freedom fighter, took up the call of the oppressed and sacrificed his life for the liberation of African people in particular, and all humanity in general, from racism, economic exploitation, and imperialist wars. January 15, 1890, Sitting Bull. Sioux resistance leader and staunch opponent to compromise with the Euro-American settler government was assassinated by Indian police in the payroll of the United States government. January 15, 1871. Rosa Luxemburg, a great woman revolutionary socialist, was born in Poland. Her activism was centered in Germany, where she gave life to the Marxist theory in the concrete effort to reorganize Germany and all of Europe under a non-exploitative system where workers' and women's rights would be the center of societal development rather than the capitalist class. January 16, 1966. First conference of the Organization of Africa, Asian, and Latin America, the so-called Third World, met in Havana, Cuba, building the non-aligned movement to provide assistance diplomatically, economically, etc., for the remaining vestiges of colonialism throughout the world. January 17, 1961. The CIA and its local puppets murder Patrice Lumumba, the democratically elected leader of the Congo. January 17, 1979. The Iranian people overthrew the US CIA stooge, the Shah of Iran. January 17, 1942. Muhammad Ali, world heavyweight boxing champion, was born. Muhammad Ali is best known as an outspoken militant against US imperialism in Vietnam and against the oppression of African peoples in the United States. January 18, 1959. The Lumber Indians defeated the Ku Klux Klan in the battle near Morton, North Carolina in 1958. This has been Sister Luyanda. For any comments, please contact us at freedomnow@kpfk.org. This has been KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara. And in the language of our people in South Africa, we leave you and we say, Amandla!
Away to!
Amandla!
Away to!
Amandla!
Away to!
We will now continue with historian Professor Dr. Gerald Horne.
For Pacifica Radio, KPFK Los Angeles, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Everett Hardy II, visiting assistant professor of history at Bates College in Maine, who recently presented a paper at the most recent convention of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History that took place in Jacksonville, Florida, his subject being Philadelphia's Red Summer of 1918. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Professor Hardy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So what was Philadelphia's Red Summer and how did you get interested in it?
Philadelphia's Red Summer was a series of outbreaks of riot that occurred from July 26th until the early weeks of October. It's categorized by violence on people's homes and property, as well as police brutality and brutality by the American military against African American people. I got interested in it as I was doing the research for my dissertation, Making Black Power Pay, African American Banking in Philadelphia from 1900 to 1930. And I kept seeing these events appear over the course of the summer of 1918 and early fall, where African Americans were subject to racial violence and fighting back in a variety of ways. And so I, checked it off in a little box in my head and put it to the side because I knew I wanted to revisit what happened in Philadelphia during that period.
Fighting back in a number of ways. Could you elaborate?
Yes. They took political action. They lobbied their local government. They lobbied the local police chief. They took physical action by policing the police, forming a militia of African American men who would protect Black homes, who would protect Black neighborhoods. And they took legislative action, which came in the 1920s, where they tried to get a civil rights bill passed to protect Black people from lynching. And during this period, they also took judicial action, holding police accountable and protecting the rights of Black citizenry in court.
Now, you mentioned a moment or two ago that the U.S. military was involved in these attacks on Black Americans. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. During 1918, Philadelphia served as a major naval port. It had a long history of shipping, but during the war, those things really revved up both production of warships and war industries, and actually housing sailors in the Philadelphia port. And so we see on August 5th that a band of about 50 to 60 white sailors enter South Philadelphia into the Grays Ferry neighborhood and begin to terrorize the Black citizens there, destroying property, breaking windows, pulling Black people out of their homes, pulling their furniture out of their homes and setting it on fire. And they really rage starting in August and then through September and early October against the Black community, coming in and pulling Black people off ferries when they're traveling to places like Chester, Pennsylvania, beating them in the streets pulling them off trolleys and beating them in the streets during just random afternoons, Sundays and Saturday afternoons, and moving early in the period largely unchecked. Until really September, when the police force reconfigures itself and the African American community pushes back with the War Department.
Mm-hmm. So there were attacks by U.S. military. What about white vigilante, Ku Klux Klan type attacks in Philadelphia?
Yeah, it doesn't seem that it's organized by the Klan. But there is white vigilante action throughout the entire riot period. These are neighbors who are of Irish and Italian descent. It seems more Irish than Italian. And they are angered by Black movement into what they perceive as their neighborhoods. And so they are joining together, throwing bricks through Black windows, pulling Black people from their homes, setting these homes ablaze, which is an interesting tactic in a place like Philadelphia, where the homes are all connected in what is termed row housing. And so they're so angry with this sort of Black success and Black movement into quote unquote white working class spaces that they're willing to risk even the homes of their neighbors and themselves through creating fire and riot. The organized groups that really participate in this are the Philadelphia police and the naval officers via sailors. Those are the ones who are armed and organized who participate, not a Ku Klux Klan-like organization.
Could you shed light on that?
Yeah, the original event starts on July 26th and lasts for a period of about 4 days, right, of rioting as we see traditionally. It springs up again on August 4th through about August 7th, with again a period of rioting and beatings. It then happens, it ends, is quelled, happens again on August 14th to about August 16th, and then it's quelled and it occurs again around September 7th to about September 9th. And then everything is quiet until the first week, really, of October, where we see a final incident by naval officers, and I shouldn't say officers, by soldiers and sailors who accost Black people near a ferry near Camden, Pennsylvania, the Camden Fair. Camden, I'm sorry, New Jersey, the Camden Ferry, a ferry between New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. So you suggested a moment or two ago that this question of Black people moving into so-called white neighborhoods was a spark. From where in the South, or from where in the United States, were these Black people coming from? Was it the Carolinas? Was it Virginia? Or elsewhere?
Yeah, African Americans are coming from, as you mentioned, the Carolinas. They're coming from Maryland. They're coming from Virginia. They're coming from Delaware. Some are even coming from southern New Jersey. Philadelphia was a major economic center for Black people specifically during this period. It is a heart of a thriving Black community, what I have called a Black Wall Street, to steal that term from Tulsa. You know, it has 2 banks and 2 hospitals and newspapers and a African American baseball team and scores of businesses and restaurants. And so African Americans are pouring into Philadelphia for those reasons, but also during the war, the opening of wartime industries is bringing people in from the South and from the mid-Atlantic states to find their wealth in Philadelphia.
Now, were there analogous anti-Black riots taking place in the United States in 1918? What similarities and differences do you espy?
Yeah, there are for sure riots occurring across the nation in 1918, but I would even push it back and say this has been a culmination of riots beginning in as early as 1916. You know, when we're thinking of the Houston riot, when we're thinking of Elaine, Arkansas, which is in 1919, but we're thinking of what happens in East St. Louis in 1917, and then in Chester, Pennsylvania in 1917 as well. Chester, Pennsylvania is located about 20 miles south of Philadelphia, and it saw a race riot in 1917 that was centered on the opening of war industries and African Americans moving into those jobs. And so, yes, there is a large uptick in a series of race riots that we often think culminate in 1919, right, with the Red Summer that sees a national rioting. But I would argue that this has sort of been a long process if you're looking at the longer history between 1960 and 1919. And I think the thing that stands out with Philadelphia as opposed to many of the others is that a lot of them are tied to work. African Americans are coming into these cities and they're taking jobs from, or what white people perceive as their jobs, right? They're creating competition for work. In Philadelphia, it really is centered on space. That African Americans aren't necessarily competing for the same jobs, but they are competing to live in the same spaces. And so the control of space in Philadelphia, the control of housing and who gets to own property seems to be what this riot is centered on. And it sets it apart from other riots that we see in other areas.
What about the role of Black veterans? That is to say, those perhaps who had fought in World War I, for example, those who had martial skills, for example. What role do they play?
Yeah, I haven't uncovered a lot about veterans themselves, but the primacy of the gun as the tool for the protection of the community is central to this story. When it sparks on July 26, 1918, a probation officer named Adela Bond, Mrs. Adela Bond, uses her weapon to protect herself from the riot that is gathered around her home. African American men from all walks of life gather together around August 14th to form this a militia where they would gather their guns to protect their community, police their community. And city police on July 30th were actually going into Black households and confiscating Black guns to the point where lawyer George Edward Dickinson actually brought a case before the courts in Philadelphia to demand the return of these weapons, and he was successful in that suit. And so, while veterans do not seem to appear in the forefront of this battle, the right to self-protection and self-determination is.
Mm-hmm. What role does gender play in your story?
I think gender is essential to really understanding the way African American history, particularly in Philadelphia, functions and the way Black people work together. It all starts because a Black woman stands up and demands protection for herself. The protection is not coming from the police, who do not come to her aid, so she has to protect herself with her weapon. And that's a story that is consistent in Philadelphia history, right? The right of Black women to protect their communities through organizing, through physical protection, as Mrs. Adela Bond did, and the desire for Black men to create spheres of protection for those women, for them to create spheres of protection for Black homes. It's all interconnected, I think, during this period. And when we're thinking of gender, I think we often think of it in terms of women's history. But the right of a man to defend his home, to defend his place, is essential to understanding how manhood functions in American society. At this point, America is at war, and Black men are joining up in droves to express their manhood. And so it is natural then that in Philadelphia, when there's a race riot, that an expression of manhood would be for them to go out and to protect their communities through legislative, physical, and political means.
Finally, Professor Hardy of Bates College, does our audience have an opportunity to look forward to something you'll write and publish about this? And refresh our recollection about that earlier publication you mentioned a few moments ago.
Yeah, I am working now to turn this paper into a larger publishable work on the Red Summer in Philadelphia. I'm looking through other newspaper sources and police records to really flesh out that story of the fight, the political fight for Black self-determination and protection, and the physical fight for Black protection and self-determination, as well as the legal fight. And so hopefully by the end of the year, next year, I will have a publishable work on hand that the listeners could pick up and read and be transported by. My larger work, my dissertation, was on Black banking in Philadelphia between 1900 and 1930, entitled Making Black Power Pay. And in that, I explore the way Black economic nationalism is utilized as a strategy by Black people in Philadelphia to challenge Jim Crow in the urban North and to build the idea of this Black nation. I argue that that's done through the intergender mutualism of Black men and Black women. And it is a requirement that Black men and Black women work together in order to really achieve Black autonomy in the United States.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Everett Hardy, the second visiting assistant professor of history at Bates College in Maine. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Habarigani. Join us for Black History Month KPFK fundraiser by Freedom Now and Move the Crowd. A conversation and book signing with Dr. Gerald Horne, hosted by our sister Dr. Melina Abdullah, happening Saturday, February 3rd, 2024 from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Center for Black Power in Africatown, Leimert Park. Dr. Horne will be discussing his books, I Dare Say, and Acknowledging Radical Histories. This is happening at 3423 West 43rd Place, 90008. Tickets are online at kpfk.org or at the event. Once again, that's Saturday, February 3rd from 1 to 3 p.m. Conversation and book signing with Dr. Gerald Horne. We'll see you there. And now for prison radio commentary.
Hello, this is Mr. Eddie Treadwell at Brooks Correctional Facility here in Michigan. And I just want to speak a little bit about the need to improve upon yourself, right? I think it's very important for us to always be in a mindset of growth and development, to try to evolve into our best selves. Is we need to try to evolve and improve upon ourselves, upon the best part of ourselves. We don't want to improve upon the negative aspects of ourselves, but we want to always try to enhance our best qualities, and make them better, to be the best that we can be. As long as our abilities are directed towards aiding and assisting others, it's important to facilitate the best qualities of yourself. So you want to be a gift to the world, right? You want to be able to give to the world, give to your community, give to your family, give to the strangers that's at your door. So then we come to be a blessing to those in whom we come in contact with, and it's all about being all we can be. The police come and telling me I got to get up off the phone. But the point is just try to be the best that you can be, and always look for the best in self. Give people the best in you as you look for the best in others. This is Mr. Eddie Treadwell at Brooks Correctional Facility, prison number 205017. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or any concerns or any need of any assistance of any kind. I'll be there to help and assist you. Have a great day.
These commentaries are recorded by Prison Radio.
This is Sister Flora, and you are listening to Freedom Now at KPFK 90.7 FM in occupied Mexico, including Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, 93.7 FM in San Diego, and streaming live on the web at kpfk.org. Today's program, as well as 10 prior editions, can be reheard at kpfk.org/audio archive, and scroll down to Freedom Now. From 12 to 1 p.m., following Freedom Now is her sister Assumpta, with Spotlight Africa addressing issues facing Mother Africa. For a truly alternative international perspective on world affairs, check out RTTV Russia, CCTV China, and online at Presna, Latina Cuba Telesur Venezuela, News 24 South Africa, and Press TV Iran.
And now we go to our broadcast of an interview conducted by Block Report Radio's Minister of Information, J.R. Valray, interviewing Dr. Gerald Horne regarding Haiti, Cuba, and the Congo.
Greetings, Mr. Horne. It's an honor to have you here on the Ministry of Information. You're a world-renowned scholar, internationally known. I've gotten a lot from your work, and it's an honor to be able to ask you a few questions, man. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
World War III seems to be actively in full effect. I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss the history behind major conflicts in the world that include Black people. To kick it off, Haiti has been under a UN occupation for over a decade. In October, the UN approved an intervention/invasion that the Kenyan government has agreed to take part in. Can you explain a little bit about the history of Haiti and how we got to this moment?
Well, your audience needs to realize that when the Haitian Revolution was detonated, 1791 to 1804, it not only was a blow against an exploitative system of slavery,
that had ensnared millions of Africans, it upset an entire social system. It would be as if capitalism were overthrown in the United States of America. Not only that, but it contributed to a general crisis of the entire slave system in the hemisphere, including in the United States of America. And that crisis can only be resolved with its collapse, which it did, as you know, in the United States in 1865, when enslavers had their property in human bodies seized without compensation. Now, if you want to make an exploiter angry, take their property and do not compensate them after taking it. Because of the world historic importance of the Haitian Revolution, it attracted the negative attention, the furious attention of exploiters in the hemisphere, not least the United States, which then embarked on a campaign to destabilize the Haitian Revolution, not unlike, by the way, the ongoing campaign to destabilize the Cuban Revolution, ignited in January 1959. And exploiters, unlike many in our community, have a long memory. And even though some of us who have benefited from the sacrifices of the Haitian revolutionaries may have forgotten their immense sacrifices, those who profited from the exploitation of enslaving Africans have yet to forgive, have yet to forget, which brings us to what you introduced a moment or two ago, that is to say, the ongoing attempted destabilization of Haiti, a direct result of fury about the Haitian Revolution. And sadly and tragically, they've been able to inveigle the Kenyan government, which really should know better, to embark on this path of trying to send forces across the Atlantic, across the Caribbean Sea into Haiti. Now, as of this moment, President Ruto in Nairobi is being blocked by members of the parliament. But there's no guarantee that that blockage will continue. So we should continue to be resolute in our defense of our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean.
Can you talk a little bit about how natural resource rich Haiti is and why European powers refuse to let what they call the Pearl of the Antilles flourish?
Well, Haiti, to begin with, was an island exploited by the French. And of course, they suffered grievously, speaking of the slave owners, when they were booted out in 1804, and then many of them moved to New Orleans, to Savannah, to Charleston, to Norfolk, to Philadelphia to continue their campaign. The French turned Haiti into a kind of sugar island. It suggested that Haiti was probably the most profitable colony that then existed before 1804 because of the gross exploitation of the Africans who toiled on the sugar plantations. It has also been suggested that Haiti is a repository of vast natural resources, including, for example, gold. But what happened is that because of the intentional neglect of Haiti by the exploiting class, that it has not been possible to exploit that gold to the extent that it could deliver wealth into the coffers of Haiti. I should also say, and I should have said this at the top, that in the 20th century, actually between 1915 and 1934, to be precise, the U.S. sent occupying forces to Haiti, and I'm happy to say that many Black Americans objected to that process. But it's also important to note that when those U.S. military men arrived in Haiti, They walked into the National Bank and took custody of Haiti's gold reserves, which is about the equivalent of $13 million or $15 million today. So Haiti has been treated quite shabbily by the United States of America, and it's a direct result, as noted, of the gumption of Africans in Haiti to revolt against enslavement.
Just to switch gears a little bit, and let's take it to the Congo. The history of the Congo is a brutal one of rape, murder, theft, environmental terrorism, slavery, and more. Can you give us a brief history of the Congo and how we got to a point where Uganda and Rwanda has murdered over 10 million people for their European, Israeli, and American masters to exploit the wealth of the heart of Africa?
Well, before I turn to the Congo, let me also mention that Haiti has various forms of oil in addition to various agricultural products, including bananas, cocoa, mangoes. A lot of Major League Baseball are manufactured by Haitian workers.
And iridium, right? Iridium, the mineral?
Yes, and I could go on in that vein. But with regard to Congo, now I'm speaking of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's named today because, of course, there are two Congos. There is the former People's Republic of the Congo, Congo-Brazzaville, now known as Republic of the Congo. It's on one side of the Congo River. It's the smaller Congo, exploited by France, colonized by France. And then on the other side of the Congo River is the Belgian Congo, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You may recall that at the so-called Congress of Berlin in the 1880s, the European powers, and by the way, the United States had a seat at that Congress, they basically carved up a good deal of Africa like a Thanksgiving turkey. And what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo was turned over as a personal preserve to King Leopold of Brussels, who then ignited a reign of terror against the Congo. Because if you think that Haiti has natural resources, then you really need to look at the Congo, because of course the Congo is much larger. It has coltan, which is an item in your mobile phones. It has all manner of mineral wealth in the Congo. And as a result, I should also say that King Leopold and his minions engaged in a brutal exploitation that in some ways was worse than slavery, to be blunt. Because what happens in the late 19th century and a good deal of the 20th century in Congo is that the exploiters, if the African workers are not working with the energy that the exploiters preferred, they could have their hands cut off, they could have their feet cut off, etc. So inevitably, this gave rise to robust protests embodied in the figure of one Patrice Lumumba, who led the struggle against Belgian colonialism, helping to bring a kind of independence to Congo by 1960, 1961. But alas, what happens is that this is taking place in the midst of a Red Scare and a Cold War. The U.S. manufactures this fantasy that Patrice Lumumba and the opposition, the figures opposing colonialism, were dupes of the Reds, dupes of communists. And that led to his assassination about 1961. And this is after visiting Washington, by the way. Now, what's interesting about that is that this is not a secret. The CIA station chief in Congo at that time, by the name of Larry Devlin, not Devlin, but Devlin, actually wrote a book detailing how he and other CIA cadre actually assisted in this assassination. And in fact, they tried to destroy the evidence. That is to say, by trying to eviscerate the entire body of Patrice Lumumba. And it was only in the last year or so that, as I recall, one of his teeth, a gold tooth, was returned in a ceremony from Brussels, where it had been taken back to its homeland. In some ways, that's a kind of metaphor for the brutal exploitation of the Congo. And to link the two, many of those who were enslaved in Haiti actually had Congolese roots, just like post-Haitian independence, many Haitians decided to work and help to assist independent Congo. And that would include the family of the great Haitian filmmaker Raoul Peck. You may be familiar with his films such as I Am Not Your Negro about James Baldwin.
Yes.
He actually did a film about Lumumba, a docudrama.
Right, it was a
He's
great
probably
one.
our most, sorry?
I said it was a great film.
Yes, he's probably our most talented and courageous filmmaker, still turning out the work. I really recommend his film about settler colonialism, Exterminate All the Brutes. It's very instructive about the history of the United States, by the way. And so there are many parallels between Haiti and Congo, and the parallels include not only gross exploitation of the bodies of Africans, but also gross exploitation of the wealth. That is to say, gross exploitation of what's beneath the ground and the people walking on the ground. And to return to Haiti once again, as you commented, Haiti has one of the largest iridium reserves in the world, second only to South Africa. And this is only one of the precious minerals there, including, as noted, gold, silver, copper, all of which may be worth close to $20 billion. And that's probably an underestimate, which makes Haiti such a prize for the capitalists. And that is something that it has in common with today's Democratic Republic of the Congo, which, by the way, is larger in territory than Western Europe.
Wow, I didn't know that. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I don't think people realize the relationship that all of us have around the world. We are in the information age, the internet age. We have cell phones. Everybody has a number of cell phones and tablets. Would the information age be possible without the exploitation of the Congo?
Well, as already noted, the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, has 60% of world reserves of coltan. Coltan, as your question suggested, is a mineral that's found in all of these ubiquitous mobile phones that you see all over the United States of America. One of the problems with getting coltan out of the ground in Congo is that the exploiters have turned to child labor because, of course, they feel that child laborers are more pliable, more compliant than their parents might be, that they can be paid less, that they can be easily disposed of. That's their word, not mine. And this makes coltan even more important, not only because of its deployment in mobile phones, but also in laptops and also other kinds of electronics as well. So the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's been accusations that there is a kind of slavery existing in the Democratic Republic of the Congo Coltan also is highly toxic. It's blamed for birth defects in the area where it is mined. With regard to the question of slavery, it's also a kind of child slavery. And it's been estimated that there may be up to 6,000 child slaves working in the mines of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Also, I should say that coltan is radioactive, which probably contributes to the toxicity or making it contribute to birth defects, for example. And I should also say that Congo is not alone with regard to this having this mineral. Rwanda, neighboring Rwanda, also has substantial reserves of coltan, also known as tantalum. And Rwanda is reputed to be the world's single largest exporter of this mineral, even though it is only exploiting, as we speak, a small amount of its productive capacity. So I could go on in this vein, but I would also be remiss if I failed to mention that Apple, that trillion-dollar corporation in Northern California, Cupertino to be precise, is a major beneficiary of this horrendous process, a major beneficiary of the exploitation of child slaves in Congo. And I would hope and imagine that at some point, our comrades and friends in Northern California would have some sort of protest at the Cupertino headquarters of Apple, and perhaps make sure that there are cameras there, make sure that there is press there, because ultimately what that would do is put pressure on Apple with regard to exploitation, and perhaps could prompt them to move away from child labor to moving to an adult labor force that's paid handsome and decent wages under tolerable working conditions.
Definitely, I agree, and definitely I want to be a part of it. People, let's get in contact in Northern California. Let's get with that. BlockReportRadio@gmail. Let's get on that. What is the relationship that Israel has had with the Congo? In particular, Israel is known for its technology savviness in the international market. Can you speak to what's Israel's relationship with the Congo?
Well, you need look no further than Dan Gertler, born in 1973, an Israeli billionaire businessman involved in natural resources, founder and president of the so-called DGI Group. He has diamond and copper mining interests in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, has invested in iron ore, gold, cobalt, oil, agriculture, and banking, very close to the regime, a net worth of $1.2 billion US dollars. Interestingly enough, Dan Gertler has been so notorious that even the United States government found it necessary to try to impose sanctions upon him for corruption and involvement in human rights violations. That means that U.S. citizens face up to 20 years in prison if they do business with Dan Gertler, but of course, that has not deterred or detained many of them. You might also know that Dan Gertler also served in the notorious Israeli Defense Force, which now, as you know, is committing war crimes in the Gaza Strip. I don't know if I mentioned that he is also involved in diamond mining, and of course is the father of 12 children, which means that the Gertler family is poised to go on to wreak havoc in Congo for decades to come, unless, of course, we're able to turn the tables on him. Dan Gertler reputedly has connections to the Mossad, which is the Israeli version of the Central Intelligence Agency, and has been involved in all manner of misdeeds within the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So, once again, I should mention that Dan Gertler also happens to be the grandson of Moshe Schnitzer, Schnitzer, the founder of the Israeli Diamond Exchange. And I'm sure I need not remind you about blood diamonds, how diamonds, which are much appreciated on this side of the Atlantic, are figuratively dripping with the blood of Africans. So I could go on in this vein with regard to Dan Gertler and his exploitation of Africans and the Congo, but I know our time is expiring.
Last but not least, can we talk a little bit about Cuba? Cuba has had an embargo on it since 1959 after the Cuban Revolution declared victory. Can you speak a little bit about what the history is behind this crippling genocidal embargo? You know, what's the history behind that? And can you speak a little bit about what's going on currently with Cuba?
Well, I mentioned a moment or two ago that the exploiting class, the investor class, have long memories. And not only have they not forgotten the Cuban Revolution ignited January 1st, 1959, many of these exploiters also were burned, figuratively, if not literally, as a result of slave revolts in Cuba in the 19th century. But more recently, I think Cuba has ignited concern in the United States because you know that Henry Kissinger, the war criminal, just passed away the other day at the age of 100. He had a particular animosity towards Cuba because in 1975, when Angola on the west coast of Africa, and as you know, many Black Americans, whether they know it or not, are Angolan ancestry, Angolan heritage, it surged to independence, but then apartheid South Africa was going to try to foil that independence by an invasion. But the Cubans dispatched troops across the Atlantic at a very stiff price for a small, relatively poor country, and defeated the apartheid army on the battlefield, which set the stage for elections in South Africa that brought independence under President Nelson Mandela in 1994. When that happened, that upset the apple cart of many exploiters because Angola, as you probably know, is a major producer of oil. It too has diamonds, and it too was a beneficiary of Cuban largesse. And beneficiaries of Cuban largesse include many in Africa because Cuba not only sends soldiers to fight racists, it also sends doctors and nurses and medics. I lived in Zimbabwe some years ago, and the healthcare system in Zimbabwe was largely dependent upon Cuban doctors and medics. Same was true for Namibia, the northern neighbor of Angola, due north. And so this kind of courage has led inevitably to an embargo, or a blockade, I should say, against Cuba, trying to strangle the revolution, just as the United States helped to cripple the Haitian Revolution. But the 20th century, I'm happy to say, is different than the 19th century. That is to say, Cuba has more allies in the 20th century and 21st century that Haiti was able to muster in the 19th century. And so Cuba has been able to survive. As a matter of fact, Cuba is so prestigious in the international community that myself and others have recommended that Cuba serve as a mediator between Guyana and Venezuela, who are neighbors, who may be, I'm afraid to say, on the verge of war because of a territorial conflict there's probably only one nation that's trusted by both sides and can mediate credibly, and that's Cuba. So Cuba plays an outsized role in the world. It plays an outsized role in the Caribbean. And in fact, some of us have suggested, to come full circle, that those who are truly concerned about resolving disputes in today's Haiti really should call upon the Cubans to be involved. But as you know, that would anger and infuriate Uncle Sam. And so right now, that's not on the table.
So right before we get out of here, can you refer us to, I know you have a pantheon of books, but can you refer us to some of the books that you have that cover some of the subject matter that we covered today?
Well, I wrote a book on the Haitian Revolution, Confronting Black Jacobins, a sort of sequel, or if you like, the book by the late Trinidadian scholar C.L.L. James, his book called Black Jacobins. I wrote a book on the Cuban Revolution and Cuba, Race to Revolution, United States and Cuba during slavery and Jim Crow. I wrote a book on Southern Africa that deals with what I just described. White supremacy confronted, U.S. imperialism and anti-communism versus the liberation of Southern Africa from Rhodes to Mandela. I lived in Zimbabwe, as I mentioned. I did a book on Zimbabwe. From the Barrel of a Gun is the title. So that's all I can think of right now. Oh, yeah, I did a book on Kenya. Mau Mau and Harlem, with a question mark. The U.S. and the liberation of Kenya.
Did you do anything on Lumumba or the Congo?
Only in the context of my book, White Supremacy Confronted, because I deal with the successor, the unfortunate successor to Lumumba, speaking of the man once known as Joseph Mobutu, a kleptocrat, a thief, a murderer. And I deal with him at length in that book because he too was collaborating with apartheid South Africa.
Well, how do people stay in tune with you online? Do you have an online presence that people can hit up?
Well, yes, my Facebook page. And by the way, on my Facebook page, you can find an announcement that I'll be speaking in Los Angeles. I know that's due south, but still, I'll be speaking there on February 3rd, 2024 in Leimert Park. Be there or be square. There's an Instagram under my name. And of course, I have enough YouTube lectures and videos to occupy you for the rest of your life.
Well, right on, man. I want to just salute you, salute your work. It was an honor interviewing you today. Hope to be in touch with you a lot more. And until next time, wait, last but not least, you also have a radio show. Can you pump your radio show?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. God, do a shout out to Freedom Now on KPFK, the sister station to KPFA. And if I must say so myself, I think we do a very good job of bringing information to our audience, akin to what I'm bringing to your audience right now. That is to say, information about Black Americans in particular, although we do cover the Caribbean and Africa. But we specialize a lot on the struggles, and I do mean struggles, particularly slave revolts, strikes, protests that Black Americans have been involved in historically to bring us to this point.
All right. Well, thank you. I will tune in. I hope others tune in to Saturdays, Freedom Now. And I appreciate you coming on the Ministry of Information.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Peace.
And in closing, we'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Everett Hardy II. Thank you to our producers, Dr. Gerald Horne, Sister Flora, Sister Femi, Brother Brandon, our board op Wendell. Thank you, J.R. Valray with Block Report Radio, and all those who made today's program possible. Stay tuned for our Sister Assumpta coming up next with Spotlight Africa, addressing issues facing Mother Africa. Signing off for Freedom Now, this is Sister Thage, and until next week, as always, we stand ready for revolution.